Welcome to the special gathering commemorating International Holocaust Remembrance Day in The Hague, where we each year organize a commemorative event which we focus on the impact of the Holocaust and the development of international law. The theme which we have chosen this year is compensation, reparation, and restitution. When we witness or experience cruelty and injustice, the task of the court is to uphold justice, sometimes in the form of retribution, sometimes in the form of restoration. When we witness or experience theft and robbery, the task of law enforcement is often to restore justice in the form of restitution. Responding to something as huge and all-encompassing as the Holocaust cannot be restricted to the courts and law enforcement bodies. Societies cannot be mere bystanders. We are all players. We must counter cruelty with kindness, evil with goodness, hate with love, and repair that which is fractured.
How does one repair the Holocaust? How can we do whole what can never be undone? Is it really possible to undo the massacres, the persecutions, the deportations, the forced labor, the separation of families? Can we simply, to use the permanent court's language, wipe out the torturing, the suffering, the maiming and gassing of millions of Jews and other minorities? What about the anguish of a person about to be gassed in a furnace? I don't think that full or even adequate or fair reparation in the sense of restitution can ever be made in such circumstances. Such monstrosities cannot be undone or wiped out. We must prevent another Holocaust from taking place.
You can come tonight with rhymes of how the war at last died and repeat them 100 times. Each damn time I shall cry. Lines written and translated by the Dutch-American poet Leo Vroman. Vroman was Jewish and in 1940 managed to escape the approaching evil and thus survived the war. He at least. Today, we are remembering all the people who did not survive the Nazi regime of annihilation. Today, on this day, the 27th of January, the day designated by the United Nations as International Holocaust Remembrance Day. The United Nations that was set up in response to the horrors of the Second World War. Here too, in our UN city, The Hague, at the start of the war, The Hague was home to the second largest Jewish community in our country, in the Netherlands, after Amsterdam. And by 1945, that community had been largely wiped out. Even now, 75 years later, we still need to be on our guard to combat all forms of anti-Semitism. Not look away, but stand up for our fellow citizens.
The process of compensation, reparation, and restitution that we are concerned with today started almost 70 years ago. In March 1952, 3 delegations came together in the village of Wassenaar, just outside of The Hague. A delegation representing the government of West Germany under the leadership of Chancellor Adenauer, a delegation representing the government of the young state of Israel under the leadership of Prime Minister David Ben-Gurion, and a third delegation, the Claims Conference, led by Nahum Goldman. The delegations had the task of negotiating a program of indemnification for the material damages to Jewish individuals and to the Jewish people caused by Germany during the Holocaust. For the first time in the history of warfare, a country which had abused and murdered civilians, both its own citizens and those of countries it occupied, agreed to compensate the survivors. The revolutionary idea was that direct compensation was to be paid to the individual survivors and compensation to a state that did not even exist at the time of the atrocities.
I'm speaking from the hallowed grounds of the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum, which I helped create with President Carter. The Holocaust created for the first time in the history of warfare a legal process by which a country which had abused and murdered its civilians, both its own citizens and those of countries it occupied, agreed to compensate survivors. It is critical to understand that today in 2021, there are around 350,000 Holocaust survivors around the world, of whom at least 50% are poor or near poor. 90% of those in the former Soviet Union and in Central and Eastern Europe, 35 to 40% in Israel, and around 30% in the United States. Germany has paid over $80 billion since the 1950s. Almost all of the major provisions the claims conferences negotiated with Germany go only to survivors in economic need. More than half of the 350,000 survivors received some form of payment from the German government. A second unique feature in international law occurred during the Clinton administration under my leadership, and that is payment by private companies for the harm they caused to civilians during World War II. The Holocaust was not only the greatest genocide in history, it was the greatest theft in history, only a small fraction of which has been recovered.
According to available records, my brother and I are the only surviving twins of the Holocaust. We were taken to Westerbork, and then 7 months later, on February 15th, 1944, deported to Bergen-Belsen in cattle cars so full one could hardly breathe, and without food, water, or latrines. That awful day marked my parents' 10th wedding anniversary. Although Belsen was not an extermination camp, it was a living hell of death, starvation, constant beatings, and disease. I will forever remember our 6th birthday, when my brother and I each received half a sandwich with butter and chocolate sprinkles, Hagelslacht. It was our greatest birthday present ever. My brother and I ate a few crumbs every night, so the sandwich would last and last. My father had sold his wedding ring to make this wonderful gift possible. I live in gratitude, but always with the knowledge and also the burden that 6 million others did not have my luck and deserved the same grace.
Please join me for a commemoration moment. Today, 6 residents will light a candle. Together, they honor the memory of the 6 million victims of the Shoah.
Sir Winston Churchill said, "A nation that forgets its past has no future." This phrase could also be applied to the international community as a whole. As His Excellency Ambassador Eisenstadt emphasized, there was nothing inevitable about the Holocaust. In order to guarantee a better, brighter future for our world, we need to enhance our efforts to educate about what happened in the Shoah. Continue the restitution efforts, fight anti-Semitism, learn from the past, and apply these lessons.